Diane, honey?
Mom, we're leaving for Miami tomorrow. I sold your Carmel Beach house and the Mustang. We needed the money. Goodbye.
50 years I'd raised her, sacrificed everything for her, and she threw me away like I was trash. But I took a deep breath and smiled, because there was something my dear daughter didn't know. Before diving deeper into this journey, I have a small request. Please subscribe, like this video, and write in the comments which city you're listening from. Because on this channel, we don't just tell stories, we listen to each other. Each of you has a story waiting to be told in your heart. Maybe your story will be a balm for someone else's wound. If you have a story you've been keeping inside, you can send it to the email address in the description section. Because sometimes the first step to healing is just telling it. Let's go back to the beginning, because every powerful ending deserves a fitting origin story. My name is Margaret, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 71 years old, and up until that moment, I thought I knew my daughter. I'd only been a widow for 6 months. William, Bill to his friends, my husband, died of a heart attack while we were having breakfast together, like we had every morning for 45 years. That morning he'd served me coffee with cream and toast. Like always, he'd kissed my forehead and said, "Good morning, my love." Those were his last words. Since then, Diane had been more present in my life. Or so I thought. She came to visit 3 times a week. She helped me with the funeral arrangements, accompanied me to the grocery store. She even suggested I go to the doctor to get a checkup. "Mom, now that you're alone, you need to take better care of yourself," she said with a smile that I thought was love, but now understand was convenience. The beach house had been our refuge for years. Bill and I bought it when Diane was 15, with so much effort and sacrifice. Every summer, we'd drive up the Pacific Coast Highway to Carmel, creating memories, celebrating birthdays, Christmases. Diane brought her friends, later her husband Brad. I cooked for everyone, cleaned, did the laundry. It was our family tradition. I never thought she'd see it as just money. And the car, that old '67 Mustang that Bill maintained like it was his son. He'd wash it every Sunday, religiously change the oil. Always park it in the same shady spot under the oak tree. Diane knew what that car meant to me. It was the last thing I had left of him. His scent still clung to the seats. When she hung up, I was still sitting on that uncomfortable green plastic chair, surrounded by other sick people. And for the first time in months, I didn't cry. Something strange happened inside me, a calmness I hadn't felt since Bill's death. Because in that moment, I remembered something I'd completely forgotten. 3 days before his death, Bill had given me an envelope. "Margaret, keep this in your dresser drawer. If something happens to me, open it after a while, but only when you feel ready." I'd put it away without thinking much about it. After the funeral, with so much pain and so many formalities, I'd simply forgotten. But there it was, waiting for me at home. The nurse called me into the examination room. A doctor examined me, told me I was in good shape for my age, that I just needed more rest and better nutrition. I nodded and smiled, but my thoughts were elsewhere. I was thinking about that envelope, about the coldness in Diane's voice, about how Brad was probably behind all of this. He'd never liked me, always saw me as a burden. I left the office and walked slowly to the bus stop. I didn't have a car anymore, according to Diane. But while I waited, I couldn't help but smile. There was something poetic about it. My daughter thought she'd left me penniless, but what she didn't know was that Bill, my dear Bill, had always been a forward-thinking man. The bus came and I sat by the window. I watched the city pass by, the houses, the stores, the people running back and forth, all with their own tragedies, their own secrets. I had mine too, and I was about to discover them. When I got home, I went straight to my bedroom. I opened the dresser drawer, and there was the envelope, exactly where I'd left it. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up. I could feel there were several documents inside. Bill had written my name on the front in his careful handwriting. I sat on the bed we'd shared for so many years and took a deep breath. Outside, it was starting to get dark, and the house filled with those familiar shadows that no longer frightened me. I opened the envelope slowly, like I was unwrapping a birthday present. what I found inside would change everything. What I found in that envelope took my breath away. There were legal documents, deeds, bank certificates, and a handwritten letter from Bill. My eyes filled with tears as I read his familiar handwriting. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. Forgive me for not telling you everything while I was still alive, but I wanted to protect you from worry. All these years, I've been investing our savings in real estate and businesses. We don't just own the beach house, we have 6 other properties, including the building where Diane lives with Brad. We also have shares in 3 companies worth more than you can imagine. You're wealthy, my love. You always were, but now it's on paper too. My hands shook as I looked through the documents. There were deeds to houses in different neighborhoods of Monterey and San Francisco, a downtown condo, a small boutique hotel on the coast, and indeed, the 20-story building where my daughter lived. Bill had been the silent owner for the last 10 years, but had put everything under the name of a company I didn't know existed. And according to the papers, I was the sole heir to this company. There were also bank statements from accounts I never knew existed, numbers that seemed unreal. Bill had been a bus driver for 40 years, but apparently also a very clever investor. Every dollar we saved, every sacrifice we made, he had quietly multiplied, and I never knew anything about it. In the letter, Bill explained that he'd kept everything secret because he didn't want me to worry about money, nor did he want Diane to find out about our true financial situation. You know our daughter, Margaret. If she knew we had this much money, her attitude would change. I want her to love us for who we are, not for what we have. What irony. Our daughter had abandoned us thinking we had nothing, when in reality we had everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house, touching the old furniture, the ornaments that Diane had always criticized as outdated. I looked at the family photos on the wall, especially the one where she was 5 years old, sitting on Bill's lap, laughing. Where had that sweet child gone? When had she become so cold, so calculating? Very early the next day, the phone rang. It was Diane again. Her voice sounded different, softer, but I'd already learned to distrust that tone change. Mom, how are you? I wanted to tell you that we've already transferred the money from the house and the car. We deposited your share into your account. It's not much, but it'll last you a few months while you look for something smaller. My share? I asked in a calm voice. Yes, Mom. Obviously, we didn't want to leave you penniless. We gave you 30%. That's fair, right? We needed the money for the investment in Miami. Brad has an incredible business opportunity there. 30% of my own things. How generous. I understand, daughter. And when are you leaving? This afternoon. We've already packed our bags. We'll be gone at least 6 months. Maybe longer if the business goes well. But don't worry, Mom. When we come back, we'll help you find a small apartment. Something that fits your needs. Fits my needs. As if she knew what my needs were. All right, Diane. Have a safe trip. Oh, Mom, I knew you'd understand. You've always been so understanding. We love you very much. And she hung up. I stood there with the phone in my hand, and for the first time in months, I laughed. I laughed like I hadn't since Bill's death. The situation was so absurd, it was funny. My daughter had robbed me, thrown me out of my own house, treated me with unbearable condescension, and all to finance a Miami adventure that would probably be a disaster. But what bothered me most wasn't the money. It was the ease with which she'd discarded me. Years of my life dedicated to her, full of sacrifice, unconditional love, and she'd erased me from her life with a 2-minute phone call. That hurt. I checked my online bank account. Sure enough, they'd deposited an amount that probably seemed generous to them, but to me, it was an insult. They'd sold the beach house far below market value, probably because they needed quick cash, and Bill's Mustang they'd practically given away. That afternoon, I watched from my window as Diane and Brad loaded suitcases into a taxi. He carried 2 huge suitcases. She carried a very expensive-looking travel bag. I watched them laugh, kiss, make plans. They looked like 2 teenagers excited about an adventure. They never turned toward my window, never said goodbye. As the taxi drove away, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea and Bill's documents spread out on the table. I had to make decisions. I could call a lawyer, reclaim my properties, take back everything they'd taken from me. But something told me there was a better way to handle this, a more educational way. I called Jonathan, the lawyer who'd handled Bill's affairs. He'd been at the funeral, offered his condolences, told me if I needed anything, don't hesitate to call him. Well, now I needed him. "Mrs. Margaret, how lovely to hear from you. How are you doing?" "Fine, Jonathan. I need to see you urgently. I found some documents from Bill that I don't quite understand." "Of course, you can come to my office tomorrow morning." "I'll be there." That night I slept deeply for the first time in months. I dreamed of Bill. He was sitting in his favorite chair, reading the newspaper like every morning, and when he saw me, he smiled and said, "It was time, my love. It was time for you to stand up for yourself." I woke up with a strange feeling. It wasn't exactly happiness, but it wasn't the sadness I'd felt for so many months either. It was something like determination. For the first time since Bill's death, I had a clear purpose. I was going to take back what was mine, but not in the way Diane expected. The next morning, I got ready more carefully than usual. I put on my burgundy dress, the one Bill always said made me look elegant. I combed my hair, put on some makeup, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I hadn't seen in a long time. I saw a strong woman. Jonathan's office was downtown in San Francisco. It was an old but elegant building with marble floors and large windows. Jonathan greeted me with a warm smile, but when I showed him the documents, his expression changed completely. "Mrs. Margaret, this is much more than I imagined. Bill was a very intelligent man. You see, according to these papers, you're the owner of." "I know, Jonathan. I've already reviewed them. What I need to know is what I can do legally." Jonathan explained that everything was in order, that the documents were legitimate, that I was the rightful owner of all these properties. He also confirmed something I'd already suspected. The sale of the beach house had been illegal because Diane had no right to sell it. "We can get the house back immediately, Mrs. Margaret. And we can also take legal action against your daughter for fraud." "No, Jonathan. I don't want to take legal action. I want to do this differently. I want everything to remain secret for now." "Can you help me?" Jonathan looked at me curiously but nodded. "Of course. You're my client. What do you need?" "I need you to discreetly recover the beach house, to do what's necessary to reverse that fraudulent sale. And I need you to help me take actual control of all my properties, especially the building where my daughter lives. I understand this will be a process that takes a few weeks, but it's perfectly doable." "Perfect. And Jonathan, I need no one to know I'm behind this, at least for now." When I left Jonathan's office, I felt like I'd woken from a very long dream. I walked through the downtown streets, watched the people, the buildings, life taking its normal course. But for me, everything had changed. I had a plan. The following weeks were the strangest of my life. Officially, I was a poor widow abandoned by her daughter, but secretly, I was a wealthy woman quietly orchestrating the recovery of my fortune. Jonathan worked efficiently, and every few days he'd call to update me on the progress of the legal formalities. I decided to stay in my house for now. It belonged to me after all, even though Diane probably expected me to move into a furnished room. Every morning I'd wake up, have breakfast at the same table where Bill and I had spent so many years, then go for a walk around the neighborhood. The neighbors greeted me with that mixture of pity and curiosity they reserve for newly widowed women. Carol, my longtime neighbor, approached me one afternoon while I was watering the plants in front of the house. "Maggie, honey, is it true that Diane went to Miami and left you all alone?" "Yes, Carol. She left with Brad. They have business plans there." "And how will you manage, dear? We all know Bill didn't leave much money behind." If you only knew, I thought. "Don't worry, Carol. I'll be fine. Do you need anything? I can bring you food, help with shopping." "You're very kind, but I'm really okay." Carol looked at me with that expression I knew well. It was the same look I'd received after the funeral. compassion mixed with a little relief that it wasn't their tragedy. Well, you know where to find me if you need anything. These conversations repeated constantly. The butcher, the baker, the lady at the corner store, everyone spoke to me in that gentle tone they use for unfortunate people, and I nodded, smiled, thanked them for their concern, but inside, part of me was enjoying this act. It was like living a double life. Jonathan called me on a Wednesday morning. "Mrs. Margaret, I have good news. I've managed to reverse the sale of the beach house." The buyers didn't know the sale was fraudulent, so they got their money back without any problems. "The house is yours again." "Excellent, Jonathan. And the building where Diane lives? That's more complicated. Technically, you've always been the owner through the company, but we need to make some administrative changes so you have direct control. That should take another 2 weeks." "Perfect. Keep me posted." After hanging up, I sat in the kitchen with my coffee and thought about Diane. She'd been in Miami for 3 weeks, and I hadn't heard from her. No calls, no messages, not even a postcard. For her, I'd ceased to exist once she had the money she needed. But I knew that would change soon. I decided to visit the beach house. I took the bus to the coast, the same route Bill and I had driven hundreds of times. The house was just as I remembered it. Small, painted cream, with a deck overlooking the Pacific. The new buyers had added some potted plants, but otherwise everything was the same. I sat on the curb across the street and looked at it for an hour. I remembered summer afternoons when Diane was little, running on the beach, building sandcastles. Bill would grill fish while I prepared salads in the kitchen. Diane brought friends, then boyfriends, then Brad. All those happy moments she'd reduced to a simple commercial transaction. An elderly man came out of the house and saw me sitting there. He approached curiously. "Are you all right, ma'am?" "Yes, thank you. Just remembering." "Did you know the previous owners?" "Yes, I knew them very well." What a shame what happened. We were told the elderly lady was very sick and had to sell quickly. We thought it was a bargain, but now it turns out the sale wasn't legal. We had to return the house. "Did you meet her personally?" "No, we did everything through intermediaries, but we were told the daughter was handling everything because the mother couldn't." What a sad situation. If you only knew how sad it really was, I thought. "Well, I'm glad you didn't lose your money." "Yes." Fortunately, everything worked out, although now we have to look for another house. We really liked this one. I left there with a heavy heart. It wasn't just the money that hurt. It was the ease with which Diane had lied about me. She'd invented a story about my anus. She'd used my supposed vulnerability to justify her actions. For her, I wasn't a person with feelings. I was an obstacle that needed to be removed. That night, I called Jonathan again. "Jonathan, I need your help with something else. I also want to get Bill's Mustang back." "That will be harder, Mrs. Margaret. The car was actually registered in your name, but your daughter had a power of attorney that allowed her to sell it." "How is that possible?" "Apparently, you signed that power of attorney a few months ago, after your husband's death. Don't you remember? There it was, the moment when Diane had started planning all of this. I vaguely remembered signing some papers she'd brought me, telling me they were to facilitate the funeral formalities and inheritance. I was so confused by grief that I signed without reading. How naive I'd been. "I understand, Jonathan. Is there a way to get it back?" "We can try, but it will be more complicated. We'd have to prove you signed the power of attorney under deception or coercion." "Let's do it. I want to take back everything she took from me." In the following weeks, I developed a strange routine. Mornings, I was the poor widow everyone knew. I'd go shopping, talk with neighbors, maintain the appearance. But afternoons, I became the businesswoman. I studied Bill's documents, spoke with Jonathan, planned my next move. I learned things about finance I never thought I'd need. I discovered that Dill had been much more intelligent than I'd thought. Each of his investments had been carefully calculated. The building where Diane lived, for example, wasn't just profitable through rent. It was also in a rapidly appreciating area. I also discovered that Brad, Diane's husband, had debts. A lot of debts. He'd taken out loans using the apartment where they lived as collateral. Not knowing he wasn't the actual owner. When the banks found out, he'd have serious problems. Jonathan called me on a Friday with important news. Mrs. Margaret, we've completed all the formalities. You now have full control over all your properties. I've also gotten Bill's Mustang back. The buyer turned out to be an acquaintance of mine, and when I explained the situation, he agreed to return it for a small compensation. Excellent work, Jonathan. Now I need your help with one more thing. I want you to send my daughter a letter. What kind of letter? An eviction notice. There was a long, tense silence on the other end of the line. Mrs. Margaret, are you sure you want to do this? She's your daughter, after all. Jonathan, my daughter threw me out of my own house with a 2-minute phone call. She sold my things without asking me. She treated me like I was trash. Now she's going to learn that actions have consequences. I understand. I just wanted to make sure you'd considered all the implications. I've considered them. Jonathan, all of them. That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake, imagining Diane's face when she read the letter. The initial confusion, then the disbelief, then the panic. She'd probably think it was a mistake, that someone was trying to scam her. But when she called to verify, she'd find out everything was completely legal. The next day, as if she'd been waiting for my call, the phone rang at 8 in the morning. It was Diane, and her voice sounded desperate. Mom, I need to talk to you urgently. Good morning, daughter. How was Miami? Mom, I don't have time for that right now. I got a very strange letter yesterday. It says I have to vacate my apartment in 30 days. This has to be a mistake. Do you know anything about it? An eviction notice. How strange. From whom? From a company I've never heard of. It's called, wait, let me find the letter. William Investments, LLC. Do you know this company? Bill had used his own name for the company. How poetic. No, daughter, I've never heard that name. Are you sure the letter is real? That's what I'm trying to find out. Mom, I need your help. I don't know what to do. Brad left me in Miami, ran off with another woman, and now I'm coming back to this. I don't understand what's happening. There was the confirmation. Brad had left her, probably when the money ran out, or when he realized the legal problems back home were more serious than he'd thought. Poor Diane. She'd sacrificed her family for a man who was worthless. I'm very sorry, daughter. Where are you now? I'm at the apartment, but I don't know for how long. Mom, can I come visit you? I need to talk to someone. I don't have anyone else. The irony was perfect. Now that she'd lost the man she'd abandoned me for, she remembered she had a mother. Of course, daughter. Come whenever you want. I'm coming right now. I hung up and looked at myself in the mirror. I had to be perfect for this performance. I put on my most conservative gray dress, pulled my hair into a simple bun, and practiced my expression of a concerned but resigned mother. When Diane arrived, she'd see exactly what she expected, a poor, vulnerable widow abandoned by her own daughter. Diane arrived an hour later. When I opened the door, I was surprised at how bad she looked. She'd lost weight, had deep circles under her eyes, and her expensive clothes looked wrinkled and neglected. Her eyes were red from crying. Mom, she said, and for a moment I thought she'd hug me, but she stopped, as if suddenly remembering how things had changed between us. Come in, daughter. Would you like some coffee? Yes, please. We sat in the kitchen at the same table where I'd read Bill's documents weeks before. Diane looked small in that chair, lost, like when she was a child and came to tell me about her problems at school. Mom, I'm so sorry for how I left. I know I didn't behave well toward you. It's all right, daughter. No, it's not. I treated you badly, said terrible things to you. And then her voice broke. Now I have no one. What happened with Brad? He ran off with a waitress from a hotel in Miami, a 25-year-old girl. It turns out there never was a business in Miami. It was all a lie. He just wanted to escape his debts here and use the money from selling your house to finance his adventure. All the debts? Yes, Mom, a lot of debts. It seems he'd been taking out loans for years, using the apartment where we lived as collateral. But now I'm finding out he wasn't the owner of the apartment. How is that possible? Here was my chance. I don't know, daughter. Real estate matters are very complicated. The problem is, the banks are now coming after me for his debts. They say since we were married, I'm responsible too. And on top of that, this eviction notice. Mom, I don't know what to do. I have no money, no job, nowhere to live. She started crying. Real tears, real desperation. And for a moment, my mother's heart softened. I wanted to hug her, comfort her, tell her everything would be okay. But then I remembered the coldness in her voice when she called me from the doctor's office, the ease with which she'd discarded me, the way she'd spoken to me as if I were a burden. Have you talked to a lawyer about the letter? I don't have money for a lawyer, Mom. We spent all the money in Miami. Brad took what little was left when he left with that woman. And what will you do? I don't know. I thought maybe I could stay with you for a while, just until I find work and can find a small place to live. There was the question I'd been waiting for. After throwing me out of my own house, after selling my things, after treating me like trash, now she wanted me to save her. She wanted the poor widow she'd created to rescue her from the consequences of her own actions. Of course, daughter. This will always be your home. Diane looked at me surprised, as if she hadn't expected it to be so easy. Really, Mom? After everything that's happened? You're my daughter, Diane. That will never change. She stood up and hugged me this time. It was a desperate hug from someone drowning, clinging to the only thing they can find. I hugged her too, but not with the unconditional love from before. Now there was calculation in my embrace, strategy. Thank you, Mom. I promise you, I'll find work soon. I won't be a burden. Don't worry about that now. Rest, recover, and then we'll see what options you have. Diane left that afternoon to get some things from her apartment. I stayed in the kitchen thinking about how easy it had been. She'd come to me exactly as I'd planned. Broken, desperate, without options. And the best part was, she suspected nothing. For her, I was still the poor, abandoned mother who needed her pity. But this was just the first part of my plan. Letting her stay with me would give me the perfect opportunity for the next phase. I'd let her settle in, let her feel secure, let her believe she'd found refuge in my house. And then, when she least expected it, I'd show her the difference between poverty by choice and poverty by consequence. That night, I called Jonathan. Jonathan, I need you to do one more thing for me. Tell me, Mrs. Margaret. I want you to investigate Brad's debts. I want to know exactly how much he owes, to whom, and what legal options I have to separate them from my daughter. That will take time, but it's doable. Perfect. And Jonathan, I want you to keep this absolutely secret. No one must know I'm behind this investigation. Of course, Mrs. Margaret. May I ask about your final plan? My plan, Jonathan, is very simple. I'm going to save my daughter. But first, she needs to understand what it really means to hit rock bottom. When I hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine that Bill had saved for special occasions. It had been a long time since I'd had such a special occasion. The game had begun, and for the first time in months, I held all the good cards. Diane moved in with me the next day. She arrived with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box, everything that remained of her former life. I watched her unpack in her old room, the same one where she'd slept during her teenage years, and I could see the humiliation in every movement. She'd gone from living in a luxury apartment to seeking refuge in her childhood bedroom. Mom, I found this in the apartment, she said, showing me an envelope. It was among Brad's things. Your name is on it. It was another envelope from Bill. My heart raced, but I kept my composure. My name? How strange. Yes, look. She showed me the envelope. Indeed, my name was written in Bill's handwriting, but this envelope was different from the one I'd found in my dresser. This one was smaller, newer. Maybe Brad found it among Dad's things when he died and forgot to give it to me, Diane said. Possible. May I see it? I opened the envelope in her presence. Inside was a short letter and a small key. The letter read, Margaret, if you're reading this after I gave you the main envelope, it means our daughter is going through a difficult time. This key opens a safety deposit box at Central Bank, downtown branch. The number is 247. There's something there that can help you help her. But use it wisely. With eternal love, Bill. Diane read the letter over my shoulder. A safety deposit box. Dad had a safety deposit box. I had no idea, I lied. Your father never told me about it. Do you think we should see what's in it? I don't know, daughter. Maybe it's better to leave things as they are. But Mom, maybe there's something important in there. Documents or, I don't know, maybe something valuable that could help us. The desperation in her voice was palpable. Diane was clinging to any possibility of finding a way out of her situation, and I'd let her cling a little longer before showing her the whole truth. All right, I said after a calculated pause. We can go tomorrow. That night, Diane and I had dinner together for the first time in months. She'd cooked to be useful, but the food tasted of guilt and desperation. She told me more details about what happened in Miami, and each story was worse than the last. Brad lied to me about everything, Mom. Not just about the business, but about the debts too. I thought he only owed a little money, but it turns out he owes over $200,000. And the worst part is, he used my name for some loans without me knowing. How is that possible? He forged my signature. When I married him, I gave him some documents so he could handle the banking for our joint account. I never thought he'd use them for that. Do you have a way to prove you didn't know? I don't know. Everything is so complicated. The banks say since we were married, I'm responsible for all his debts anyway. And the divorce, I don't even know where Brad is now. He's completely disappeared. His phone is off. He doesn't answer emails. Nothing. It's like he evaporated. Perfect. Brad had fled like the rat he'd always been, leaving Diane alone with the consequences of her actions. In a way, he'd done me a favor. Now my daughter was experiencing exactly what I'd felt when she abandoned me. The betrayal of someone she'd completely trusted. I'm very sorry, daughter. I didn't know things were that bad. I didn't know either, Mom. I thought Brad loved me, that we'd build something together. But it turned out I was just an easy way for him to get money and documents. Diane started crying again. How could I be so stupid? How did I not see what he really was? It was tempting to tell her I'd seen the warning signs from the beginning, that I'd tried to warn her, that Brad had never seemed trustworthy to me. But that would have shattered my facade of the understanding, vulnerable mother. Love sometimes blinds us, daughter. Don't blame yourself. But, Mom, I didn't just ruin my life. I ruined yours too. I treated you terribly. I took away your house, your car, your things, and all to give them to a man who abandoned me at the first opportunity. It's all right, Diane. No, it's not. Now we're both in trouble because of me. You lost everything Dad left you, and I lost my marriage and my future. We're two poor women trying to survive. If she only knew, I thought. If she only knew that at this moment I have more money than she can imagine, that I own the building she lived in, that I can solve all her problems with one phone call. But it wasn't time yet. The next day we went to the bank. Diane was nervous, hopeful. I continued playing the confused widow who didn't understand much about finance. The bank employee led us to the safety deposit boxes, checked my ID, and opened box number 247. Inside was jewelry, a lot of jewelry. Rings, necklaces, bracelets, earrings. Some pieces I recognized as heirlooms from Bill's family. Others were completely new to me. There was also a letter explaining the origin of each piece and its approximate value. Diane gasped. Mom, this must be worth a fortune. Do you think so? Yes, look at this emerald and this pearl necklace. Mom, Dad kept a treasure here. According to Bill's letter, the jewelry was worth approximately $200,000. It was a considerable sum, but nothing compared to my remaining wealth. It was like finding coins under the sofa when you have $1 million in the bank. What do we do with this, Mom? I don't know, daughter. These are family memories. But Mom, we could sell some pieces. With that money, you could get your beach house back, and I could pay off some of Brad's debts. There it was again. Even when finding something valuable, Diane's first reaction was to think about how to use it to solve the problems Brad had created. She still hadn't learned anything. Are you sure you want to use your father's inheritance to pay Brad's debts? What other choice do I have, Mom? If I don't pay something, the banks will seize everything I have, and technically, I don't have anything. Everything was in Brad's name. Think carefully, daughter. Once you sell this jewelry, you can't get it back. I know, but what else can I do? I can't find a job with all these pending lawsuits. No employer will want to hire someone with so many legal problems. We took the jewelry home. Diane spread it out on the kitchen table and examined each piece individually, calculating which one she could sell and which she could keep. It was painful watching her reduce her father's memories to numbers on a piece of paper. Mom, I think with this we can solve the most urgent problems. Not all of them, but at least the most serious ones. And then I'll look for work, try to rebuild my life. Maybe I can rent a small room, something cheap. You don't have to leave, daughter. You can stay here as long as you want. No, Mom, I've already taken advantage of your kindness too much. Besides, you need money too. You can't support me indefinitely. It was fascinating to see how Diane had built a completely false picture of my financial situation. For her, I was a poor widow who could barely support herself, when in reality, I had enough resources to buy the entire building where we'd found the jewelry. That afternoon, Jonathan called me. Mrs. Margaret, I have the complete report on Brad's debts. The situation is worse than I thought. How much worse? He owes several banks over $300,000. And he also has debts to private lenders. What's more concerning is that for some of these loans, he used forged documents with your daughter's signature. That means Angela is responsible. Legally, it's complicated. If we can prove she didn't know, we could free her from some debts. But it will be a long and costly process. How costly? For a good lawyer specialized in these cases, probably $75,000, and there's no guarantee of success. I understand. And if she just pays the debts? If she has the money, that would be the fastest solution. But I doubt she has access to that amount. Jonathan, I want you to prepare all the necessary documents to free my daughter from these debts. But don't tell her anything yet. You'll pay them, Mrs. Margaret? I'll do everything necessary to protect my daughter. But this has to be handled in a very specific way. When I hung up, I found Diane in the living room, looking at the jewelry with a sad expression. She looked lost, like a child who'd broken their favorite toy and didn't know how to fix it. What are you thinking about, daughter? About Dad. How disappointed he'd be in me if he could see what I've done with my life. Your father loved you very much, Diane. He'd understand. No, Mom. He taught me to be responsible, to value family, not to be selfish. And I did exactly the opposite. I abandoned my mother for a man who turned out to be a liar. I sold my family's memories for money. I ruined everything he built. For the first time since her return, I heard genuine remorse in her voice. It wasn't just regret about the consequences of her actions, but true acknowledgement that she'd acted morally wrong. People make mistakes, daughter. What's important is learning from them. But how do I learn from this, Mom? How do I repair the damage I've caused? There was the question I'd been waiting for. Diane was finally ready to face the truth about her actions and their consequences. But it still wasn't the right time to reveal my final card. First, I had to let her hit rock bottom. The following days were crucial for my plan. Diane decided to sell most of the jewelry, keeping only the engagement ring Bill had given me and a small necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. I watched her prepare to go to jewelers, research prices, negotiate with buyers. It was painful watching her reduce decades of family history to commercial transactions, but necessary for her to understand the true weight of her decisions. Mom, I got $180,000 for the jewelry, she said one afternoon, counting the bills on the kitchen table. It's less than I expected, but it's enough to pay the most urgent debts. Are you sure you want to do this? I don't have a choice. If I don't pay something soon, they'll seize everything. Even this house could be in danger if they prove I have any legal connection to the properties. How ironic the situation was. Diane was worried about losing a house that belonged to me, paying the debts of a man who'd abandoned her, with money from jewelry that had belonged to the same man who'd created the fortune that could save her. And how will you decide which debts to pay first? I talked to a free financial counselor at the bank. She said I should prioritize debts that have real collateral, because those are the ones that affect properties or can cause immediate seizures. Diane had matured a lot in these few weeks. The woman who'd sold my things without consultation was now carefully examining every financial decision. The suffering had made her more responsible, but also more fragile. That night, while she was organizing debt documents on the table, I received a call from Jonathan. "This is Margaret. I have important news. We've located Brad." "Where is he?" "In Miami, as your daughter suspected. But here's the interesting part. He's trying to get a French residency permit through a sham marriage with that young woman your daughter mentioned." "A sham marriage?" "Yes, apparently the girl needs papers, and he needs a way to stay in the States without being deported for his debts. But the most important thing is we found evidence that he deliberately forged your daughter's documents with the intention of fleeing the country. That means Diane can be freed from the debts. With this evidence, yes, we can prove fraud and coercion. Your daughter wouldn't have to pay anything Brad did behind her back. It was perfect. I had the way to legally free Diane from all her debts without her suspecting I had the money to do it. Jonathan, I want you to start the legal process immediately. Should I tell your daughter? No, I want the process completely finished before I tell her anything. I don't want to give her false hope. Understood. This will take about 3 weeks, maybe a month. Perfect. When I hung up, Diane looked at me curiously. Who was that, Mom? A lady asking for Mrs. Meyer, the neighbor on the corner. She had the wrong number. Lying had become easy. Every day that passed, I felt more comfortable in this double life I was leading. On one hand, I was the poor, abandoned mother Diane thought I was. On the other, I was a wealthy woman quietly orchestrating her daughter's rescue and education. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Diane struggle with decisions she'd never had to make before. How to stretch money for food, how to negotiate with creditors, how to look for work when your credit is ruined. It was a cruel but necessary education. "Mom, I had 3 job interviews today," she told me one afternoon, arriving home with swollen feet and a tired face. At 2 of them, they said they can't hire me because of the pending lawsuits. At the 3rd, they offered me a part-time job as an office cleaner for the night shift. "Will you take it?" "I don't have a choice. It doesn't pay much, but it's better than nothing. And I can work nights to keep looking for something better during the day." My daughter, who'd lived a comfortable life for over 40 years, was preparing to clean offices at night. It broke my heart, but it also filled me with pride. She was finally facing reality without expecting someone else to solve her problems. "Are you sure you can handle that much physical work?" "I'll have to learn. I can't be a burden to you anymore, Mom. It's enough that you're letting me live here for free." "This is your home, Diane." "No, Mom, this is your home and I'm here because of your generosity." But I won't take advantage of that forever. One evening, while Diane was at her first cleaning shift, Carol came to visit me. She sat with me in the kitchen, drank tea, and looked at the family photos decorating the walls. "Maggie, I have to ask you something. Did you know Diane would come back under these circumstances?" "What do you mean?" "Well, when she left, she seemed so confident, so arrogant. She talked about the great life she'd have in Miami, how successful Brad was. And now she's come back completely destroyed, working as a cleaner, living with you again. Life takes many turns, Carol. Yes, but there's something else. I've been watching Diane these days, and she looks different. Not just sad, but humble, like she's learned something important." Carol had always been very perceptive. "What do you think she learned?" "I think she learned the value of things she took for granted, like having a mother who loves her unconditionally." "Maybe, Maggie. Can I tell you something? When Diane left and treated you so badly, many of us thought you'd never forgive her. But here you are again, taking care of her, giving her a home when she has nowhere else to go. She's my daughter, Carol." "Yes, but not all mothers would do what you're doing, especially after being treated the way you were." If Carol knew the whole truth, that I had the power to solve all of Diane's problems, but I was choosing to let her suffer a little longer so she'd learn the full lesson. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" I think you're doing what a good mother would do. But I also think Diane needs to fully understand what she lost when she abandoned you. What do you mean? I think she needs to appreciate you, not just as the mother who rescues her when she's in trouble, but as the strong woman who built a stable life for 45 years. She needs to respect you, not just need you. Carol had hit the nail on the head. That was exactly the point of my entire plan. I didn't want Diane to come back to me out of desperation. I wanted her to come back out of genuine respect and mature love. And how do you think that can happen? I think it's already happening. I've seen her these days, Maggie. The way she talks to you now is completely different. She's no longer the daughter who gives you orders or treats you like a burden. Now she's an adult woman who's genuinely grateful to have a mother like you. That night, when Diane came back from work, I saw her arrive tired but with a new dignity. She'd earned those few dollars through her own effort, and that meant something to her. How was your first day? Hard, but not as bad as I thought. The other ladies who work there helped me a lot. One of them, Mrs. Johnson, showed me the tricks for cleaning more efficiently. Mrs. Johnson? Yes, she's 60 years old and has been cleaning offices for 20 years. She told me she started after her husband left her with 3 small children. She says it's not the job she dreamed of, but it gave her independence and dignity. She sounds like a wise woman. She is. She told me something that made me think a lot. What did she tell you? She said there are 2 types of people who end up doing this job. Those who are there because they never had opportunities, and those who are there because they ruined the opportunities they had. She asked me which group I belonged to. And what did you answer? I told her the truth, that I had every opportunity in the world. A family that loved me, a stable home, an inheritance. And I ruined it all by following a man who's worthless. What did she say? She laughed and said, "Well, honey, at least you know exactly why you're here. That puts you 1 step ahead of most people." Diane poured herself a glass of water and sat at the table with me. "Mom, I want you to know something. These days have been the hardest of my life, but also the most important. Why? Because I finally understand what really matters. It's not money. It's not living in the most luxurious apartment. It's not impressing people. It's having people who truly love you, who are there when everything falls apart." Diane? No, let me finish. You have every right to hate me for what I did to you. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I took everything Dad left you. I treated you like you were a burden. And now I'm back here, hoping you'll forgive me and take care of me. I've already forgiven you, daughter, but I haven't forgiven myself yet. And I won't until I prove I've really changed, that I've learned from my mistakes. Jonathan called me the next morning. "Mrs. Margaret, I have excellent news. The legal process is almost complete. We can free your daughter from all of Brad's debts." It was the moment. After weeks of watching Diane struggle, work, and reflect on her mistakes, the time had finally come to show her she'd never been alone. That she'd always had someone quietly watching over her. "Jonathan, I want you to arrange a meeting. It's time for my daughter to learn the whole truth." Jonathan arranged the meeting for Friday morning at his office. I told Diane I'd made an appointment with a lawyer who could help with her legal problems, but I didn't explain the details. She agreed to come, though she was nervous about the consultation costs. "Mom, I don't have money to pay a lawyer." "It's barely enough for basic expenses. Don't worry about that now, daughter. We'll hear what he has to say." We arrived at Jonathan's office on time. Diane had put on her best clothes, which now hung a bit loose on her slimmer body. She was nervous, fidgeting with her hands, expecting just another piece of bad news on her endless list of problems. Jonathan greeted us with his usual professional smile. "Mrs. Margaret, Miss Diane, thank you for coming. Thank you for seeing us." Diane replied, "Although I should warn you, my financial situation is very complicated, and I probably can't pay high fees." "That's exactly what we're going to discuss," Jonathan said, exchanging a glance with me. "But first, you need to review these documents. Jonathan handed Diane a thick folder. She opened it and began reading. Her expression gradually changed from confusion to surprise. "I don't understand. These documents say Brad forged my signature, that there's evidence of fraud, that I'm not responsible for the debts." "That's correct. We've been investigating your case for the past few weeks. We found sufficient evidence to show you were a victim of identity theft. But how is this possible? Who paid for this investigation? I don't have money for this." Jonathan looked at me. It was my moment. "Diane, there's something I need to tell you." "What, Mom?" I took a deep breath. After weeks of acting, I was finally going to reveal the truth. "Your father left me more than you knew. Much more." "What do you mean?" "Jonathan, show her the other documents." Jonathan pulled out a second folder and handed it to Diane. This time it contained the property deeds, the bank statements, the investment certificates, all the wealth Bill had secretly built. Diane read in silence for several minutes. Her face went through a whole range of emotions: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally, understanding. "Mom, this says you own the building I lived in." "Yes." "And that you have other properties, bank accounts, investments." "Yes." "That means when I sold the beach house, it was your house and the sale was fraudulent." "I've already gotten it back." Diane stared at the papers, trying to process the information. "How long have you known this?" "Since the day you called me from the doctor's office." "You knew all this when I came back from Miami asking for help?" "Yes." "You knew you could solve all my problems when you saw me crying every night?" "Yes." There was a long, tense silence. Diane closed the folders and looked me straight in the eyes. "Why, Mom? Why did you let me suffer when you could have helped me?" That was the question I'd been waiting for weeks. "Because you needed to learn something you couldn't learn any other way." "What?" "You needed to learn the value of what you'd lost. The value of family, respect, responsibility. When you abandoned me, you didn't just take money, you took my dignity, my love, my trust." Diane began crying, but these weren't tears of self-pity like she'd shed these weeks. They were tears of deep understanding. "I abandoned you when you needed me most." "Yes." "I treated you like you were trash." "Yes." "And you still saved me." "Yes, but not in the way you expected. I didn't save you by giving you money so you could keep making the same mistakes. I saved you by letting you hit rock bottom so you could learn to save yourself." Jonathan discreetly intervened. "Miss Diane, your mother paid all the legal costs to free you from Brad's debts. She also recovered all the properties that were fraudulently sold. You're completely free of legal problems." "And the cleaning job I got?" Diane asked. "You can quit if you want," I said, "but I hope you don't." "Why?" "Because that job is teaching you something you never learned when everything was easy. It's teaching you the value of your own effort, the dignity of honest work, the importance of appreciating every dollar you earn." Diane wiped away her tears and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't the look of a daughter who needs her mother. It was the look of an adult woman who respects another woman. "Can you forgive me, Mom?" "I forgave you long ago, daughter. The question is whether you can forgive yourself." "I don't know if I can. I did unforgivable things." "People make mistakes, Diane. What matters is what we do after we recognize those mistakes." Jonathan left us alone in his office for a few minutes. Diane and I sat in silence, processing everything that had happened. "Mom, I want you to know something. Even if you didn't have all this money, even if you really were the poor widow I thought you were, I would have learned the same lesson." "What lesson?" "That there's nothing more valuable than having someone who loves you unconditionally. These weeks, the only thing that kept me going was knowing I had a home with you, that no matter how much I'd ruined my life, you were still my mother. That will never change, Diane." "I know, but I also know I can never take that love for granted again. I have to earn it every day, with respect, with gratitude, with actions, not just words." We left Jonathan's office with a completely new relationship. We were no longer mother and daughter, connected by blood and habit. We were two adult women who'd chosen each other after passing the hardest test possible. The following weeks were weeks of rebuilding. but not the kind Diane expected. Even though she now knew I had enough resources to solve all her problems, she decided to keep her night cleaning job. "Mom, I need to finish what I started," she said one afternoon as she got ready for work. "I can't just go back to a comfortable life as if nothing happened." "Are you sure? We don't have to punish yourself forever." "It's not punishment. It's a way to remind myself who I was and who I want to be now." I watched her put on her work uniform, something unthinkable a few months ago, when she was living in the luxury apartment with Brad. But there was something different about her posture, the way she moved. She was no longer the broken woman who'd come crying to my door. She was someone who'd found dignity in honest work. Carol came over that afternoon, as she'd done every few days since Diane's return. "Maggie, there are very strange rumors going around the neighborhood." "What rumors?" "People are saying you're not as poor as we all thought. Someone saw Diane coming out of a very elegant law office downtown, and then they saw her paying off all her debts at the bank. People talk a lot, Maggie." "Yes, but they're also saying you got your beach house back, and that you somehow managed to solve all of Diane's legal problems. That costs a lot of money, Maggie." Carol knew me too well to fool her for long. "What exactly do you want to know?" "I want to know if my 40-year friend lied to me about her situation." I poured myself a cup of tea and sat across from her. It was time to be honest with someone else. Bill left me more than anyone knew, Carol. Much more. How much more? Enough that Diane and I never have to worry about money again. Carol was silent for a moment, processing this information. "And why did you pretend to be poor all these months?" "Because I wanted Diane to learn something she couldn't learn any other way." I told her the whole story, Diane's cruel phone call, my silent revenge plan, the weeks of watching her hit rock bottom, and finally the revelation in Jonathan's office. "Maggie, that's both brilliant and terrible." "Terrible?" "Yes, because you let your own daughter suffer even though you could have helped her immediately. But also brilliant, because I understand why you did it." "Do you really understand?" "Yes, Diane needed to learn the value of what she'd lost. If you'd just given her money to solve her problems, she would have learned there's always someone to rescue her from the consequences of her bad decisions." "Exactly. But Maggie, didn't it hurt you to see her suffer? Every day, every night when I saw her cry, every morning when I watched her leave for work tired and defeated. But I knew if I rescued her too soon, she wouldn't learn the lesson completely. And do you think she learned it? See for yourself. Diane knows she now has access to enough money to live comfortably, but she's chosen to keep her job. She knows she could move to a better place, but she's chosen to stay here with me. She knows she doesn't have to worry about debts, but she's using her own savings to help other women in similar situations. She's helping other women? Yes, she's made friends with the ladies she works with, and she's using some of the money she's earned from cleaning offices to help a coworker who's having trouble paying for childcare for her kid. Carol smiled. That's not the Diane who went to Miami. No, it's not. This Diane understands that money is a tool, not a goal. She understands that dignity comes from work and respect, not from material possessions. That night, when Diane came home from work, she found me in the living room, reading. "Mom, I need to tell you something. Something happened today." "What happened?" "Mrs. Johnson asked me if I was the daughter of that wealthy lady from the North Bay neighborhood." "What did you say?" "I said yes, that you have enough money that I don't need to work. And you know what she asked me after that?" "What?" "She asked me why I'm still working then. So I explained to her that I need to prove to myself I can stand on my own 2 feet. And what did she say?" She laughed and said, "Honey, that's the difference between being rich and acting rich. Your mama taught you how to be truly rich." "Mrs. Johnson is very wise." "Yes. And she made something clear to me. It's not about the money you have, but how you use it and how you relate to it." Diane sat on the couch with me. "Mom, I want you to know I've made a decision." "What decision?" "I'm going to continue living here with you, but not as a daughter returning to her parents' house. I want to stay as an adult woman who chooses to share her life with her mother. What's the difference? The difference is I'll pay my share of expenses. I'll contribute to the household maintenance, and I'll treat this relationship as a partnership between two independent women who love and respect each other. Diane, you don't need to do that. Yes, Mom, I do. I need our relationship to be different than before. Before, I was a daughter who took her mother's love and care for granted. Now I want to be an adult woman who values and nurtures the most important relationship in her life. And your work? I'll keep working, but not necessarily cleaning offices forever. I want to study. I want to prepare myself to do something more meaningful with my life, but I want to do it step by step, earning each opportunity. Do you have an idea what you want to study? Yes, I want to study social work. These weeks have shown me how many people go through difficult situations without anyone to support them. I want to use the resources we have to help other women who are going through what I went through. It was perfect. Diane hadn't just learned to appreciate what she had, she'd also found a way to use her experience for something constructive. And what about Brad? Jonathan told me he was arrested in Miami for the sham marriage. You'll be deported soon. But honestly, Mom, I don't care. That part of my life is over. You don't hold a grudge? No. Brad unwittingly did me a favor. If he hadn't left me and betrayed me, I never would have hit rock bottom. And if I'd never hit rock bottom, I never would have learned to truly appreciate what I have. That night, I went to bed completely at peace for the first time in months. My plan had worked perfectly. Diane had not only learned the lessons she needed to learn, but she'd emerged from the experience as a stronger, wiser, and more compassionate person. Bill would have been proud. 6 months later, our life had found a new balance that neither of us could have imagined before. Diane finished her social work degree with excellent grades, and I decided to use part of my resources to create a foundation helping women in situations of domestic violence and economic abandonment. Mom, the letter from the university arrived, Diane said one morning, coming into the kitchen with an envelope in her hand. I've been accepted into the master's program. How wonderful! When do you start? Next semester. But Mom, I want you to know I'm paying for it with my own savings. I've saved money from my job at the government office where I work now. Diane had gotten a job in social services after graduation, helping families in crisis situations. The salary wasn't high, but she'd learned to live with the essentials and appreciate every dollar earned. Are you sure? We can easily finance the master's program. I know, but I need to do it on my own. It's part of who I am now. Carol came over for tea that afternoon, as she'd done every Friday for the past few months. She'd become a confidant to both of us, watching our transformation with fascination. Maggie, I have to confess something, she said, while pouring herself a second cup. At first, I thought you'd been very cruel to Diane. And what do you think now? Now I think you are the wisest mother I've ever known. Look at your daughter. Look at her. It was really true. The Diane studying for her exams in the living room was completely different from the one who'd gone to Miami months before. This Diane had an inner calmness, a confidence based on her own achievements, not on material possessions. Did you know I saw Diane at the market yesterday, buying groceries for a family she's helping through her work? She didn't tell me about it. And when I asked her why she was using her own money instead of the government budget, she said some things can't be measured in official budgets. That night, Diane and I had dinner on the patio, something we'd made a tradition. It was our moment to talk about the day, plan the future, and simply enjoy each other's company. Mom, I got a very strange letter today, she said while cutting her salad. From whom? From Brad. My muscles tensed. Brad? He wrote to you? From where? From prison in Florida. Apparently, he was sentenced to 2 years for marriage fraud. The letter says he regrets everything he did, that he wants to ask for forgiveness. And how do you feel about that? Honestly, I feel nothing. No anger, no sadness, no desire for revenge. It's like that part of my life was decades ago, not months. Will you answer him? No, not because I hate him, but because there's nothing to say. The Diane who married him doesn't exist anymore. This Diane has nothing to discuss with him. I was impressed by the maturity in her voice. The woman sitting across from me had developed an inner strength that came from having hit rock bottom and pulled herself back up. You know what this whole experience taught me, Mom? What? That true love isn't the kind that tells you what you want to hear. True love is the kind that teaches you what you need to learn, even if it hurts. It's a difficult lesson. Yes, but necessary. Brad told me what I wanted to hear. He made me feel special. He convinced me I deserved a life of luxury without effort. You taught me that true wealth comes from work, respect, and genuine relationships. That night, after Diane went to her room to study, I sat alone on the patio, looked at the stars, and thought about Bill. I'd promised him I'd take care of our daughter, and finally I felt I'd fulfilled that promise in the right way. I hadn't taken care of her by giving her money when she needed it. I'd taken care of her by teaching her to take care of herself. I hadn't saved her by solving her problems. I'd saved her by allowing her to solve them herself. The next day was Sunday, and we planned to visit the beach house together for the first time since its recovery. Diane hadn't wanted to go before, saying she needed time to process everything that had happened. "Are you ready?" I asked as we got in the car. "I think so." The drive was silent but pleasant. When we arrived, Diane stayed in the car for a moment, looking at the house where we'd spent so many family vacations. "It looks exactly the same," she finally said. "Some things don't change, but others do. I'm not the same person who sold this house." We went in together. The house was clean and tidy, exactly as Bill and I had kept it for years. Diane walked through each room, touching the furniture, looking at the family photos hanging on the walls. "Mom, I want to apologize." "You've already apologized, daughter." "No, I want to apologize specifically for this house. Not just for selling it, but for reducing all our family memories to a commercial transaction. It's already forgiven. This house represents 40 years of family vacations, birthdays, Christmases. Dad built that deck with his own hands. You planted that garden. I learned to swim at that beach. And I turned it all into money to finance the adventure of a man who was worthless." She sat on the couch where Bill used to read on Sunday mornings. "You know what hurts me most?" "What?" "That when I sold it, I didn't feel anything. It was just another property. Now that I'm back here, I can feel Dad in every corner. I can hear his laughter, smell his morning coffee, see his reading glasses on the table." "He's here, Diane. He's always been here." "I know. And I also know he's proud of how you handled all this." We spent the whole day at the house, cooking together, cleaning, arranging small details. It was like a ritual of reconnection, not just with the place, but with the values this place represented. As the sun began to set, we sat on the deck Bill had built and looked out at the Pacific. "Mom, I have a proposal." "What?" "I want us to turn this house into a temporary shelter for women coming out of domestic violence situations. A place where they can stay while rebuilding their lives." It was the perfect proposal. Bill would have loved the idea of his beach house helping other families. "That's a beautiful idea, daughter. We can use part of the foundation's resources to maintain it, and I can oversee the program through my work." "Are you sure you want to turn our family refuge into something like that, Mom?" "The best refuges are the ones you share. Your dad always said a house only becomes a real home when it opens its doors to other people who need love." He was right. Bill had always been generous with our home, inviting relatives, friends, and neighbors who needed a place to stay. We returned home that evening with a new project and a completely renewed relationship. We were no longer mother and daughter connected by duty or need. We were two women who'd consciously chosen to build a life together based on love, respect, and a common purpose. That night, before falling asleep, I spoke silently to Bill. "We did it, my love. Our daughter finally understands what really matters." And for the first time since his death, I felt him answer me. "I always knew you two would make it. You're both stronger than you think." Justice hadn't come as revenge, but as education. Not as punishment, but as transformation. And in the end, we'd both gained something much more valuable than money. We'd gained an authentic relationship built on solid foundations that no future crisis could destroy. The following months were a whirlwind of activity. Diane threw herself into her master's program while working part-time at social services. I worked with Jonathan and a team of contractors to convert the beach house into a proper shelter. Mrs. Margaret, the renovations are almost complete. Jonathan told me during one of our weekly meetings, we've created 6 private bedrooms, a communal kitchen, a children's play area, and a counseling room. The place looks incredible. When can we open? 2 weeks. We just need to finalize the staff hiring and get the final permits. Diane had been instrumental in designing the program. She'd interviewed dozens of women who'd been through similar situations, researching best practices from shelters across California, and created a comprehensive support system that addressed not just housing, but job training, legal aid, and counseling. "Mom, I've been thinking about the shelter's name," Diane said one evening over dinner. "What do you have in mind?" "I want to call it Williams Haven, in honor of Dad, because he's the one who made all of this possible." My eyes filled with tears. "He would love that." "I know. And Mom, I've been talking to Mrs. Johnson and some of the other women from the cleaning crew. 3 of them are in situations where they could really use the shelter. Would it be okay if they were among the first residents?" "Of course. That's exactly what your father would have wanted." The grand opening of Williams Haven was on a beautiful Saturday in October. We kept it small, just family, close friends, and the first group of residents. Carol was there, of course, along with several neighbors who'd watched our journey over the past year. "I want to say a few words," Diane announced, as everyone gathered on the deck Bill had built. She was nervous, clutching a piece of paper with notes, but her voice was steady. "A year ago, I was in a very dark place. I'd made terrible choices, hurt the person I loved most, and lost everything I fought to find me. I hit rock bottom. But hitting rock bottom was the best thing that ever happened to me." She looked at me. "My mother could have rescued me immediately. She had the resources to solve all my problems with a phone call. But she didn't. Instead, she let me struggle, let me fail, let me figure out who I really was when everything was stripped away. And I'm grateful for that. Because what I learned is that wealth isn't about money. It's about having people who love you, work that gives you purpose, and the ability to help others." She gestured to the house. "This place exists because my father was wise enough to build something that would last beyond his lifetime. And because my mother was wise enough to teach me that the greatest gift you can give someone isn't rescuing them, it's teaching them to rescue themselves." There wasn't a dry eye on that deck. Mrs. Johnson, who was one of the first residents, stood up. "Can I say something?" "Of course," Diane said. "I've worked as a cleaning lady for 20 years. In that time, I've met a lot of rich people. And I can tell you, most of them don't know the first thing about real wealth. But this family," she gestured to Diane and me, "they understand. They understand that money is just a tool. What matters is what you do with it and who you become in the process." She turned to Diane. "When you first showed up to clean offices, I thought you were just another spoiled rich girl who'd hit a rough patch. But you proved me wrong. You showed up every night, worked hard, never complained. And even after you found out you didn't have to work, you kept coming. That's character. That's real wealth." After the ceremony, I found myself alone on the beach, watching the waves. Bill used to love this spot. We'd spent countless evenings here, planning our future, dreaming about retirement, talking about Diane. "We did good, didn't we?" I said aloud, knowing he couldn't answer, but feeling his presence anyway. The wind picked up, warm and gentle, and I chose to believe it was his response. Diane phoned me a few minutes later. She sat beside me on the sand, and we watched the sunset in comfortable silence. "Mom, can I ask you something? Anything. When did you know? When did you know I'd really changed?" I thought about it. It wasn't one moment. It was a series of moments. When you kept your cleaning job even after learning the truth. When you started helping Mrs. Johnson and the others. When you chose to stay with me, not because you had to, but because you wanted to. When you proposed turning this house into a shelter instead of keeping it for ourselves. I almost didn't propose that, Diane admitted. Part of me wanted to keep it as our private place, our family retreat. What changed your mind? Something Dad wrote in one of his letters. He said the measure of a person isn't what they accumulate, but what they give away. And I realized I'd spent most of my life accumulating things, experiences, status, but I'd never really given anything meaningful. This shelter is my way of finally giving back. Your father would be so proud of you. I hope so. Mom, I need to tell you something else. Something I've been afraid to say. My heart clenched. What is it? I'm scared. Scared that I'll mess up again. That I'll fall back into old patterns. That I'll disappoint you and Dad all over again. I took her hand. Diane, listen to me. Change isn't a destination. It's a journey. You're going to make mistakes. We all do. The difference is now you have the tools to recognize them and correct course. And you have people who love you and will help you stay accountable. Promise me something. What? Promise me that if you see me starting to slip, if I start acting entitled or selfish again, you'll call me out on it. Don't let me slide back. I promise, but I don't think you will. You've worked too hard to get here. We sat there until the sun disappeared completely below the horizon. The beach house, no, Williams Haven, glowed behind us, warm and welcoming. Inside, women who'd lost everything were finding hope. And on this beach, a mother and daughter who'd lost each other had found their way back. Not through money, though money had played its role. Not through forgiveness alone, though forgiveness was essential. But through the hard work of transformation, of hitting bottom, of learning hard lessons, of choosing every day to be better than you were yesterday. As we walked back to the house, Diane slipped her arm through mine. Thank you, Mom. For what? For loving me enough to let me fall, and for being there to help me learn to stand on my own. That's what mothers do, sweetheart. The good ones, anyway. No, Diane said firmly. That's what great mothers do. And I had the greatest. Inside Williams Haven, Mrs. Johnson was teaching the other residents how to make her famous cornbread. Children's laughter echoed from the play area. A woman I didn't know yet sat in the counseling room, finally feeling safe enough to tell her story. And in that moment, I understood what Bill had been trying to teach me all along. Wealth wasn't about the number in your bank account. It was about the lives you touched, the people you helped, the legacy you left behind. Bill had left us money, yes, but more importantly, he'd left us a roadmap for how to use it. And Diane and I, through our painful journey, had finally learned to read that map. The game I'd played, letting Diane suffer, teaching her through hardship, had been a gamble. It could have backfired. She could have grown resentful instead of grateful, bitter instead of better. But it had worked. Not because I was clever, but because deep down, beneath all the entitlement and selfishness, Diane had always been her father's daughter. She just needed to remember who that was. And now, standing in this house that would help so many women rebuild their lives, I knew Bill was smiling down on us both. We'd taken his hidden fortune and turned it into something beautiful. Not just the shelter, but our relationship. Not just the money, but the meaning. That was the real inheritance. That was the real wealth. And that was worth more than all the properties, all the investments, all the bank accounts combined. 1 year after Williams Haven opened its doors, Diane and I sat in Jonathan's office for what he called the annual review. Ladies, I have to say, what you've accomplished is remarkable, Jonathan said, spreading financial reports across his mahogany desk. The foundation has helped 47 women and 63 children in the past year. The shelter maintains a 92% success rate, meaning women who stay there go on to establish independent, stable lives. Those aren't just numbers, Diane said quietly. Those are real people, real families. I know, Jonathan smiled. That's what makes this so special. But there's something else we need to discuss. The foundation's assets have grown significantly. Your investments have performed exceptionally well, Mrs. Margaret. You're in a position to expand. I looked at Diane. We'd talked about this possibility, but I wanted it to be her decision. What do you think, daughter? Diane had changed so much in the past year. She'd completed her master's degree, earned a promotion at work, and become the foundation's volunteer director. But the biggest change was internal, a confidence that came from knowing who she was and what she stood for. I think we should open a second location, she said, but not in a wealthy coastal area, somewhere the need is greater. Maybe in the Central Valley, where resources are scarce and women have fewer options. Jonathan nodded approvingly. Fresno or Bakersfield could work well. The need there is substantial. Let's do Fresno, I said. Bill drove a bus route there for 10 years. He always talked about how hardworking the people were, how they deserved more opportunities. Fresno it is, Jonathan made a note. I'll start researching properties this week. As we left his office, Diane linked her arm through mine, something that had become our habit over the past year. Mom, do you ever regret it? Regret what? The way you handled everything. Letting me struggle instead of just telling me the truth right away. I thought carefully before answering. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh, if there was a gentler way. But then I look at who you've become, and I know it was necessary. You needed to hit bottom to find your foundation. I'm glad you did it the way you did, Diane said. If you just handed me money and solved my problems, I'd be the same entitled person I was before. I wouldn't have learned what I needed to learn. We stopped for coffee at a small cafe downtown, not because we had to watch our budget, but because Diane preferred these simple, authentic places over trendy spots. Mrs. Johnson called me yesterday, Diane said, stirring her coffee. She's moving out of the shelter next month. She saved enough for first and last month's rent on her own apartment. That's wonderful. She wants to volunteer at the shelter once she's settled. She said living there changed her life, and she wants to help other women the way we helped her. That's the best kind of success story. She told me something else too. Diane paused, her eyes glistening. She said when she first met me, cleaning offices, she thought I was just another rich girl slumming it until something better came along. But watching me stick with it, watching me actually care about the work and the women I worked with, she said it gave her hope. If someone like me could change, could find dignity in honest work, then maybe she could rebuild her life too. You were her inspiration without even knowing it. That's what she said. And Mom, that means more to me than any compliment about my education or my job or the foundation, because it means I became the kind of person Dad would be proud of. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching people hurry past on the San Francisco streets. A young mother struggled with a stroller and shopping bags. Without hesitation, Diane stood up and held the door open for her. "Thank you so much," the woman said gratefully. "No problem at all," Diane smiled. That simple act, opening a door for a stranger, would have been beneath the old Diane. She would have been too absorbed in her phone or her own importance to notice. But this Diane saw people, really saw them. My phone buzzed. It was Carol. "Maggie, turn on Channel 7. Right now. What's going on? Just turn it on." I pulled out my phone and found the local news stream. A reporter stood in front of Williams Haven, an inspiring story of generosity and transformation. Williams Haven, named after the late William Reynolds, has become a beacon of hope for women escaping domestic violence and economic hardship. But what makes this shelter unique is its origin story. The founder, Margaret Reynolds, and her daughter Diane turned personal tragedy into communal triumph. The camera cut to footage of the shelter. Women cooking together in the communal kitchen, children playing in the yard, a counseling session in progress. The reporter continued, "What many don't know is that Diane Reynolds, now the foundation's director, once hit rock bottom herself. Sources close to the family say she lost everything and had to work as a night custodian to survive. Instead of hiding from her past, she's using it to help others. She understands what we're going through," says Jennifer Martinez, a current resident. "She's been where we are. That makes all the difference." The segment ended with a phone number for donations and volunteer opportunities. "We didn't approve that," Diane said, looking stunned. "Serious enough that I wanted to tell you. Serious enough that I want you to meet him. But not so serious that I'm rushing into anything. I've learned to be careful with my heart." "When can I meet him?" "Next weekend. I thought we could all have dinner together. You, me, David, and Emma." "I'd love that." David turned out to be everything Diane described and more. He was quiet but warm, clearly devoted to his daughter, and genuinely interested in the foundation's work. But what impressed me most was how he treated Diane, as an equal partner, not a prize to be won or a resource to be exploited. Little Emma was shy at first, but she warmed up when Diane showed her the children's play area at the shelter. "My daddy says you help people who are sad," Emma said, her hand in Diane's. "That's right. I think that's really nice. When my mommy died, people helped us. Daddy says we should always help other people because someone helped us." "Your daddy is a very smart man." After they left, I gave Diane my assessment. "He's nothing like Brad." "Thank God," Diane laughed. "He's solid, grounded, and he looks at you like you're the most interesting person in the room, not the wealthiest." "That's because he doesn't know about the money. I haven't told him." I raised my eyebrows. "Don't you think you should?" "Eventually. But I want him to love me for me, not for what I have, just like you wanted with me and Dad. Your father would approve of that approach." I learned from the best. 6 months later, David proposed. It was simple and perfect, a picnic at the beach, just the four of us. He asked for Emma's permission first, then Diane's. There were no elaborate gestures, no expensive rings, just honest love. The wedding was small, immediate family and close friends at Williams Haven. Instead of expensive flower arrangements, we decorated with wildflowers that Emma and the shelter residents picked together. Instead of a fancy caterer, Mrs. Johnson and her crew prepared a feast. Instead of a traditional wedding registry, Diane and David asked guests to donate to the foundation. As I watched Diane walk down the makeshift aisle on Bill's deck, I felt his presence so strongly I could almost see him standing beside me. "She found a good one," I whispered to him. "You'd like David. He's like you, more interested in doing good than looking good." The officiant asked if anyone objected to the union. In the silence, I heard a baby cry from inside the shelter, one of the newest residents' children. Instead of being annoyed, everyone smiled. This was exactly where this wedding should be happening, in a place of new beginnings. During the reception, Diane pulled me aside. "Mom, I have a gift for you." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a legal document. "What's this?" "It's the deed to the Carmel house, the original family home where you raised me. It's yours, free and clear. I had Jonathan transfer it entirely into your name, with no ties to the foundation or any trusts. I want you to have a place that's just yours, where you can go whenever you need peace." Diane, you didn't have to. Yes, I did. You gave me everything, including the tough love I needed to become who I am today. This is just a house, but I hope it represents something more. My gratitude, my love, and my promise to always honor what you and Dad taught me. I hugged her tightly, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. That night, long after the celebration ended, I drove back to the Carmel house, my house now. I walked through each room, touching the furniture Bill and I had chosen together, looking at the photos of Diane growing up, remembering the life we'd built. I ended up on the front porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars come out. "We did it, Bill," I said aloud. "She's happy. She's whole. She's exactly who you hoped she'd become." The wind chimed through the trees, Bill's favorite oak still standing strong after all these years. "I know you can't answer, but I feel you here. I feel your approval. We took a terrible situation, your death, Diane's betrayal, my heartbreak, and we transformed it into something beautiful." I thought about the journey, the pain of that first phone call in the doctor's waiting room, the decision to let Diane suffer, the slow process of watching her transform, and finally, the joy of seeing her truly happy and fulfilled. The money helped, I continued, but it wasn't the money that saved her. It was the wisdom. Your wisdom about letting people face consequences, about teaching through experience rather than lectures, about loving someone enough to let them fall so they learn to stand on their own. A shooting star streaked across the sky. I choose to believe that's you telling me you're proud. Proud of Diane, proud of me, proud of what we built together. I finished my tea and went inside, but before closing the door, I looked back at the stars one more time. Good night, my love. Thank you for the fortune you left, both the financial one and the wisdom that came with it. We've used both well. Our daughter is thriving, your legacy lives on, and I finally understand what you meant in that letter. True wealth isn't what you have, it's who you help others become. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and groans. I climbed into the bed Bill and I had shared for 45 years, and for the first time since his death, I felt completely at peace. The journey hadn't been easy. The decisions I'd made, letting Diane struggle, watching her suffer, keeping my resources secret, could have backfired spectacularly, but they hadn't, because at the core of everything was love. Tough love, yes. Strategic love, certainly, but always, always love. As I drifted off to sleep, my last thought was of Diane, no longer the selfish woman who'd sold my house and abandoned me, but a strong, compassionate, purpose-driven woman who was changing the world one life at a time. That was Bill's true legacy. That was our real wealth. And that was worth more than all the properties, all the investments, and all the bank accounts combined. The game I'd played had been risky, but it had paid off in ways I never could have imagined. Justice hadn't come through revenge or punishment. It had come through transformation and redemption. And in the end, we'd all won. Diane, me, the women at Williamshaven, and even Bill, whose quiet wisdom had orchestrated it all from beyond the grave. That's the thing about true wealth. When you share it wisely, everyone prospers. When you use it to teach rather than enable, to empower rather than rescue, it multiplies beyond measure. And that was the greatest lesson of all.